Thanks for checking out J Cal's View. This is a presentation of Alliance-Wrestling.com, your number one source for news and information for the National Wrestling Alliance and the United Wrestling Network. This is the journey of a journalist. This is the time where I pontificate about professional wrestling. Yes, this is the time where I share my most intimate knowledge of professional wrestling with you. I don't know how intimate that knowledge is, but I'm here to share, guys. And we have something exciting to talk about. It's real exciting, actually. The news that just broke with David Marquez announcing the United Wrestling Network World Heavyweight Championship.
In my 30 years in pro wrestling, I have promoted many champions representing many different promotions, from World Championship Wrestling to New Japan Pro Wrestling to CMLL and, of course, the NWA. In the coming weeks, we'll inaugurate our first United Wrestling Network World Champion. But before that can happen, we will present right here on Primetime Live an 8-man, multi-week, open-weight tournament. Although the global pandemic has eliminated many worthy competitors, you, the international audience, will make up for that. We know that you in Germany, you in Australia, you in the UK, you in Canada, you in Mexico, you in Japan, you in Israel, and all points in between will participate in social media and help us in making this a true worldwide event. Next week, we'll announce the tournament participants. Our matchmakers have worked many hours collecting this field to ensure the highest quality entertainment possible. As always, my thanks and gratitude to everyone who supports our efforts, and I hope you choose to join us on what will be an incredible few weeks of television. Thank you.
Oh, and there you see it unveiled by David Marquez. Look at it in all its glory. The United Wrestling Network World Championship. It's going to be a classic 8.
Now, to understand this title, to understand what this means, you kind of have to jump back in the way back machine. We can do that together. Because it was roughly about 8 years ago when there was litigation between the members of the National Wrestling Alliance that basically split the company into two. It was Pro Wrestling Organization and International Wrestling Corporation. International Wrestling Corporation was an LLC created by Bruce Tharpe and Chris Ronquillo and Fred Richards. Bruce and Chris were suing the original owners of the NWA Pro Wrestling Organization for a controlling interest in the NWA. Well, at least that's what they settled on. The basics of the lawsuit really revolve around insurance and legality, if whether the insurance that the NWA was using at the time was legit or not. I'm not here to discuss that. I'm here to discuss the split, because we saw a myriad of NWA promotions actually stay on with the new LLC, International Wrestling Corporation. Now, bear in mind, this has nothing to do with Billy Corgan and nothing to do with the modern day version of the National Wrestling Alliance. This was the Bruce Tharpe era. So a lot of promotions would stick around. Even Fred would jump from Pro Wrestling Organization and actually join in with the International Wrestling Corporation. So they proceeded to go forward with the NWA and excluded Dave Marquez and a handful of other wrestling promotions. But the hallmark of what Dave Marquez was doing out here in Southern California was he was working with a lot of different affiliated wrestling promotions. Locally, we had Empire Wrestling Federation, Alternative Wrestling Show, SoCal Pro Wrestling, Mach 1 Wrestling. Northern California, we had Pro Wrestling Revolution. And then we had promotions in Arizona like Rising Phoenix Wrestling, promotions in Australia like Explosive Pro Wrestling, promotions in Utah, which was Ultra Championship Wrestling Zero. In Oregon, there was West Coast Wrestling Connection. In Las Vegas, there was Future Stars of Wrestling. On the East Coast, there was the New York Wrestling Championship, NYWC. I'm sorry, I don't remember the actual name of that promotion. There was Steel Domain out in Minnesota. There was New England Championship Wrestling out of Boston, Maine area, Massachusetts and Maine area, and then there was some other wrestling promotions scattered throughout the globe that were part of this. Now, with NWA no longer part, excuse me, with Dave Marquez no longer part of the NWA, there was no anchor, there was no world's champion to recognize, there was no camaraderie. So Marquez decided to start promoting the United Wrestling Network, and most of those promotions had joined in the United Wrestling Network. The local promotions quit working with Dave, and I mean they still work with Dave to a degree, but they were no longer under that same umbrella of the affiliate program. Um, I wouldn't say ties were severed, but you know Marquez was focused on mostly his promotion and a few promotions locally. Again, Future Stars Wrestling. They started their own Championship Wrestling from Arizona brand. It's different than what it is today. It started out in Arizona again about 8 years ago. They even tried for a Championship Wrestling from Texas. That was short-lived. Again, didn't really pan out the way that they were hoping for. And of course, over the course of the last 8 years, the membership has changed. Recently, Future Stars of Wrestling has announced that they are returning to the United Wrestling Network. In fact, their champions have been featured prominently on Primetime Live. We also see that over the course of these years, Dave Marquez has added people to this mix and taken people out. Of course, Combat Zone Wrestling was in for a while. Now I think they're on the outs. The Rockstar Wrestling out in Indiana was in. I'm not sure what their status is now. But there's what it all comes down to is that the principle behind all of this was that they were going to feature television in these markets. And you're seeing this really come into fruition right now because Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, which airs locally in Los Angeles but has markets all across the country and has a branded specific show not only in Memphis but also in Amarillo, Texas, I believe Houston, Texas, and of course in the Bay Area, San Francisco. And each of these programs has title sponsors. Now, this is different from Championship Wrestling from Arizona because that's its own separate entity. In fact, Championship Wrestling from Arizona is mostly hands off from Dave Marquez. Uh, he was focusing on Championship Wrestling from Hollywood and these brand specific shows. Arizona, still very much a part of the David Marquez family, the studios, but now it's kind of run unto itself. And then now these brand specific shows that are across the country, like Memphis, is starting to turn into more than just a brand specific program, but they're actually turning into wrestling promotions. On October the 31st, we know CW30 in Memphis is going to start promoting a live event. They were supposed to promote some live events earlier this year, but due to the pandemic pause, COVID-19, those things didn't quite play out. And of course, we talked about the Bay Area promotion, brand specific Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. That's partnering with West Coast Pro Wrestling. So don't be surprised if West Coast Pro Wrestling and the Championship Wrestling from the Bay Area form some sort of amalgamation into some new wrestling promotion. But again, you have these territories set up that are focused on television. And now even Dave Marquez was able to take a back seat from producing Championship Wrestling from Hollywood with the recent promotion for Nick Bonanno. And so that show is pretty much being ran by itself, where Marquez is now focusing his energy on new opportunities to expand that Championship Wrestling model across the country. And of course, the weekly pay-per-views that happen every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern, that are on Fight TV and of course DirecTV and on demand as well for pay-per-view viewing. So in that time, Dave has always planned to promote his own World Heavyweight Champion. Now, in years past, Dave has worked with other wrestling promotions and has recognized their world champions. I mean, he brought AJ Styles into a red carpet rumble, and AJ was the IWGP World Champion, Heavyweight Champion, International Wrestling Grand Prix. That is the top prize of New Japan Pro Wrestling, don't you know? And then, of course, in the past, working with Ring of Honor, he brought Samoa Joe into his promotion, who was the world champion at that time, and featured the ROH World title on those shows. So it's no surprise that Dave Marquez was more than happy to work with the NWA when the NWA was purchased by Billy Corgan and would feature those world championships on his shows. I mean, even dating back to before Dave had television, he was promoting with CMLL and bringing in that Super Liga Championship, the title that Rocky Romero held. So it's no surprise that he's had this relationship in the past featuring other promotions championships, but the goal all along has been to present his own World's Heavyweight Championship. Now you can see, and I'm going to put the video right here, you can see this belt. And isn't that a beautiful belt? It depicts on the side of Harley Race and Ric Flair. And now Harley Race and Ric Flair are what, you know, constitutionally what we think is what kicked off the modern day era of pro wrestling on television. And then you see on this side plate, you see Colt Boom Boom Cabana and Adam Pearce, who more or less helped launch the United Wrestling Network Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. That feud really kind of built what Dave Marquez was doing. So both of those two moments were honored on this title, and of course, this belt was designed by Belts by Dan. It's a beautiful championship belt. Any wrestler would be lucky to have this belt. So now we fast forward 8 years later. The United Wrestling Network is in a prime spot, no pun intended, to announce a World's Heavyweight Champion. They announced it, of course, last week, and we already played you the audio. You already saw it. And then, of course, the brackets will be announced on October the 20th. That's next week. That's the matchup that's going to feature Zicky Dice defending his NWA Television Championship against the Pope, Elijah Burke. And then matches will start the following week on the 27th. And that night will be highlighted between a World Championship women's match between Thunder Rosa and Serena Deeb, which is actually a rematch from AEW. So this is really exciting. We'll see how this plays out. I've heard a lot of people say, well, how does it work with an NWA World's Championship and a United Wrestling Network World's Championship? Isn't that a conflict of interest? And to that I say, yeah, it is. But the NWA was able to work with Ring of Honor, who has its own world champion. There seemed to be no conflict there. Ring of Honor has been able to work with New Japan, where they both recognize their own sets of world champions. And of course, like I previously mentioned, Dave Marquez has always recognized champions from other promotions. So that's not really a problem. And Dave himself is even liking this whole concept to Raw and SmackDown both presenting two separate world titles, two main titles, and it not being a conflict when the championships happen to be defended on the same pay-per-view or in the same show. So again, it's not entirely out of the realm. Primetime Live, of course, is the premier place to showcase this on a weekly pay-per-view every Tuesday. Plus, you have that champion who now can travel to Hollywood, California to defend the title, to Arizona to defend that title, at the Niles Theater to head out to Memphis to defend that title, to head out to Vegas to defend that title. These territories are already set up. Hell, he might even travel to Middle Kingdom Wrestling in China when that opens up, when the restrictions from COVID die down and we can travel internationally. So again, this is a big deal. I think people should be pumped up about this because, again, it's just the growth of this new wrestling brand. It's not really new. It's been around for about 8 years. But it's the continuation of the legacy of the United Wrestling Network. And, of course, this doesn't impact, no pun intended, what the NWA is doing because, of course, their goal is to get back onto their NWA Power, whether it be on YouTube or some sort of digital service. They're also looking to get back to promoting regular events. And again, this doesn't really have to be a conflict of interest because the NWA, of course, is owned by Billy Corgan. It's owned by Lightning One. So that promotion in and of itself is going to focus on the NWA. That means the NWA pay-per-views, NWA Power, whatever other programs it decides to do. Primetime Live has always been about featuring different champions from different areas, and they'll bring in, the door will still be open for the NWA champions to come and work on Primetime Live. And of course, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood has always been a haven for the NWA champions, for whether it be Tim Storm, Nick Aldis, Cody, Willie Mack when he was a national champion, James Storm as a national champion, Zicky Dice who's the current TV champion. They brought in both Jazz and Allison Kay as the women's champion. So I don't see, again, this as being a conflict. But again, United Wrestling Network, not only did they announce the Women's Championship on Hollywood last week, the creation of a Women's Championship, but they have also announced now a World's Heavyweight Championship. So I think this is going to be great. What are your thoughts? If you're listening to this, why don't you message me on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at the Alliance Blog and let me know. If you want to hashtag it belt talk or title talk. Go ahead and do it. Let's talk about this United Wrestling Network championship.